All right, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. What a great way to kick off the new year. Many friendly names. I wish we could have faces, but in the interest of getting a large enough group, we're likely going to approach 1,000 people who are watching us here. So unfortunately, we can't have all cameras on, or it'd break our systems. For those who are asking, there's several who have in the chat. Yes, there will be a recording that we'll share post. We'll include details in a follow-up email that comes out, as well as we build a couple things in the spirit of A.CRE related to this that we're, as usual, giving away for free that you can use. That's going to help you to implement this framework. I have here joined with me several members of my two worlds. And I think this is a friendly group who are in listening. I think most of you know the A.CRE team. So I want to start with some intros. I also want to call it an objective for the next 90 minutes. As I was kicking off the new year, and I was contemplating life and contemplating, how do I add value to the industry in 2026? I looked at this framework that I've used consistently across my 25-year career. Michael knows the framework well. In fact, called a decade ago when we were starting A.CRE, and I would, in his mind, pump out this content, and he'd be like, "How do you do this so fast?" And so I'm going to share the framework that relates to that and a lot of things that I do. And what's amazing and why it's call it relevant for 2026 is this framework for me has really it's been supercharged by technology. Um, uh, and so let me go ahead and stop sharing my screen just so you can see the four of us. Let's intro here the group of us. So first off, Michael Belasco. Many of you know Michael. Michael is our co-founder and co-contributor here at Adventures in CRE. But Michael also, call it his day job, is the president and founder of Firm Ridge. And Firm Ridge is an outdoor hospitality real estate investment and development firm that is investing in, I think you call it bucket list destinations, Michael. So that's what Firm Ridge does. And Michael, for this workshop, is going to stand as proxy for all of you. So what I want each one of you to think about is put yourself in Michael's shoes as I ask him questions as we move through different exercises. And while Michael plays a different role and he has a different background and he has perhaps different objectives, the process that we will go through with Michael relates to each one of you. So, Michael, hello. We have also, though, two faces that may be less familiar to you. The first, Leonard Allen Smith. So, Leonard, first off, is a longtime A.CRE follower, and so probably fits the many of you who are on. I noticed JP is one of our attendees. Hello, JP. Leonard fits similar into like the JP bucket. I think Leonard, you've been an A.CRE guy going almost back to the beginning, right?
Beginning, one of the first to do the accelerator.
Yeah. So um, Leonard, KPMG trained, Harvard educated, I think a decade in commercial real estate. And
Right.
Leonard plays a unique role in my universe because at CRE Agents, Leonard leads our enterprise AI implementation services. So he works with firms to help them implement AI. And so I brought him on so that he can be a voice and offer input, and B, he's a great guy. So Leonard's on. Also, we have Joe. So Joe Prendergast has been in the A.CRE orbit going back, what, 5 years now, Joe? 3, 4, 5 years?
Yeah.
Joe also happens to be a Cornellian. Michael and I met actually as grad students at Cornell, and Joe is a hockey player there. And a recent father. Congrats on that. Last week he was out for that. Joe works with Michael at Firm Ridge, and so I wanted to bring him in for that, but he also leads our enterprise partnerships at A.CRE. And so his role will be less active in this workshop, but I figured we'd bring him on. So how are we going to kick this off? Well, there's a lot of us, and generally we'd get on a call and we'd all look at each other and we'd get to know each other a little bit better because there's a sufficiently large size. What I figured we'd start with is a I think Zoom calls it a poll. It's in essence a get to know you thing. And for these polls, and we'll do two of them, and we'll share the results both at the conclusion of the poll here in the next couple minutes, as well as when we send out the results of the workshop. This is a way for all of us to get a sense of who we are and where each one of us are in our journey for leveraging AI. So, Michael, let's actually use you as our proxy.
Okay.
The very first question is, where are you based? Where are
I'm
you based,
based
Michael?
I'm based in the mid-Atlantic, right outside of Philadelphia.
So, right, and you're a Philly guy originally, right?
I am a Philly guy through and
Yeah.
through. Came home when as soon as I could. Yep.
Yeah. So I am based in Miami. Not a Miami guy originally. I spent a decade of my life in Latin America. I ran a housing development company in Panama, and there's a lot of synergies or similarities, I should say, between South Florida and Panama, and so that's why my wife and I ended up here. Leonard, where are you at?
I'm in New York,
Yeah.
NYC, baby.
Yeah, tri-state. Good. And Joe?
Denver, Colorado.
Denver, Colorado. Yeah. So that's where we are. That's question one. Let's go on to question two. Which function best represents your primary role? I think we already shared on our side. My background, because I didn't intro it, I started in land brokerage. So if I were answering this in the first couple of years of my career, I would say in the brokerage advisory side. I then went to work for one of my clients as a land acquisition guy, essentially doing the same thing I was doing as a broker, but bird dogging land. That took me to Latin America, that client, and I spent 6, 7 years developing housing, entry-level housing in Panama. Went back to grad school. That's where I met Michael. That's where I pivoted to the institutional side of the business, spent a number of years at the real estate investment arm of a big life insurance company, helped open Mexico for them, and so spent some time doing that. And then I was approached by the former CIO of Hines, Glenn Lowenstein, to launch a real estate private equity firm that invests institutional capital in the sub-institutional property types called Stablewood. And my role there was president. And essentially my role was to figure out how do you buy 10 times the number of assets at the same relative cost. And one way to do that is with this sort of framework. So we'll get into that further. The last question, and then I'll share the results for everyone else. So we have pretty good response rate. What asset class? So I have spanned everything but hospitality, ironically. Michael, what do you consider your asset class?
Hospitality. Yep.
Hospitality, yeah.
Mhm.
Leonard, what would you say?
Residential.
Yeah,
Yeah, a
you're
lot of single family
multifamily
residential
guy,
in New
right?
York doing luxury rehabs down in the city.
Yeah, great. Joe?
Yeah, I'd say hospitality too at this point. Helping Mike
Yeah.
permanent.
But you spent time on the office side, right? Although you were in the capital markets group?
Yeah, KBS Advisors. They're a pretty big office REIT down in Southern California. So
Yeah. So I'm ending the poll. Everyone, now you can see the results of that. When we look, it seems a big concentration, Northeast, Southeast, Midwest, West Coast. Most of us are in the United States, but we have a number of people, Canada, LATAM, Europe, Asia, and Africa. We got some time zones. We had actually quite a few people reach out saying, "Hey, I can't attend because it's the middle of the night." We'll make sure that they get access to that. In terms of functional area, it seems half of us are either acquisitions or development, number and asset management brokerage. And then in terms of asset type, half of us in multifamily. Interesting. Although that was multi-choice. So 52% of us have some connection to multifamily. Interestingly, a decade ago, or a little more than a decade ago, the office number for us today is 21%. Number would have been probably closer to 50%. Okay, let's get into our agenda. So let me start with a promise. Okay. This is my promise. Any real estate professional, regardless of technical capability or even your knowledge of AI, can multiply your output. Okay. And when I say multiply your output, that manifests itself in a couple different ways. It may be that you do more deals. So one example is me as a young broker. I quantify that I was contacting 5 times the number of clients as my competitors, and I wasn't doing it dialing for dollars, ironically. And that led to me consistently being, call it, a top 5% producer. And it was simply just an exercise. I was able to contact 5 times as many people, and I developed a system for that. So one way is like it manifests itself in, call it greater revenue. I'm looking at Michael, right? You are doing a certain number of new deals every year. Some portion of your revenue is fee revenue, and you ask yourself, how can I increase revenue? This framework's going to help with that. The next is, call it cost reduction. Okay, so when I was an underwriting associate and we'd prepare for IC, I developed some systems that allowed me to prep for our IC in about 1/4 the time. And again, this framework was the key to that, although there's obviously an implementation part to that. The third is building a business at certain margins. So one of the businesses that I run right now, we've leveraged this framework with great success, and our margins are about double what a typical business of our type would be. Again, this framework that we'll get into is that, and then most recently Stablewood, right? A team of 2, and say in an acquisitions group, able to produce the equivalent work of a team of 20. And so that's the promise. Any one of us can implement this framework. I will say this, it really comes down to one thing. Okay, so any one of us can find the multipliers, but that's the most challenging part. And that's what we'll go through, Michael, you and I here in a moment. Implementing it actually is the easy part. Why? Because I can hire someone to implement it. I can use a tool to implement it. It's actually the finding the multipliers, believe it or not, that's the hardest. And my epiphany for this came about because I've spent the last year speaking to dozens of groups on this concept of AI and its interaction with commercial real estate. And there's like a few themes that have come from this. And so as I was going in the new year and I was thinking, like, how do I contribute to the industry? There is an issue that I want all of us to address. And the best way I can think of it is we're all stuck. Okay, that was the epiphany I had. I had this epiphany that we're stuck. And what I mean by stuck is, okay, up until 2022, 2023, we were all living our lives. We were doing business the way we had always done it. And there were a few of us that were like constantly looking for ways to optimize and to do things faster and whatever else. But I think most of us, none of this stuff was really on our radar. And then AI, and I use that in air quotes because that's a very squishy term. But when I say AI, I'm really referring to generative AI. Generative AI, the ability for this technology to create things from nothing or seemingly from nothing. And for most of us, our AI consciousness hit when ChatGPT arrived. And we'd been playing with the underlying large language model to ChatGPT, GPT-3, when it came out a few months prior to the launch of ChatGPT. And that was a bit of like a, wow, this thing can do something new and unique and special. It felt actually a lot like the internet. Now I'm dating myself, but the 90s, as all of a sudden, almost overnight, I'm connected to a world that I wasn't before. Well, that ChatGPT moment happened, and I think a lot of us got excited by that, and we started using chat. And other chat solutions arrived, Claude, which are some former OpenAI, ChatGPT folks. Google, who didn't want to get left behind, launched Gemini. Perplexity, which was like a variation on it. It's like, hey, let's integrate chat with search. And those early tools, we all started going, ooh, how can I use them? And they became, in a lot of ways, a de facto search engine for us. They became a de facto way to get access to information in a faster, efficient way. It also was helpful for writing things, although especially early days, the writing was so obviously AI. And many of us got turned off by it because it would, to use the technical term, hallucinate, or it would invent stuff from out of nowhere. And many of, especially in our industry, have experienced this, where you're dealing with data that is less available, and this technology is trained to produce an output. Even if that output is wrong, it will produce an output and it will sound 100% confident. And so some of us got turned off by that. But I think most of it, what happened is we got locked into like a 2023 ChatGPT mindset, and we've been stuck there since. And what's happened with the technology from 2023 to today is that it's only accelerated. Its ability to not produce wrong things has improved, but even more so, its ability to actually perform work is getting better and better and better. And there's some industries that have learned this and are using it with great success. Tech being the most obvious, and it makes sense that tech would be that because, I mean, tech is the inventor of this, and so they would make sense that they would be the first adopters. And so you see it, and especially in the last 3 to 4 months, there's been this leap forward in the ability for this technology to perform a task, writing code. And why writing code? Why that task? Because that's the industry that's the work that that particular industry does, and so that's what the builders of that stuff focus on. But the thing is, this technology is not built for writing code. It's built for producing things from scratch, and it can perform a lot of tasks across a lot of different industries, including in ours. And my impression has been, in talking to these thousands of people over the last year, that most of us are not leveraging the capability of this technology. Okay, so that was called this epiphany I had. And so I had this conversation with Michael. And I'm like, how are you using this technology? And at least a poll of one, my intuition was correct. And so I thought, let's do this workshop and let me teach a framework that I hope with this framework will allow many of you to get unstuck. And by unstuck, I mean take what you're doing right now and double your output in 2026. And by the way, my output right now compared to pre-2023 is probably 4x. And so 2x, I think, is like a reasonable goal for every single person on this call. And what double your output means is going to be different for each one of you. And Michael, you and I will go into what doubling your output is.
Yeah, and just so everyone's clear, Spencer and I are partners on A.CRE, but we very much ventured out into different worlds. And so my adoption to AI is I call myself, affectionately a real estate caveman when it comes to this stuff. I use it, but I use it in the 2023 mind frame. I use it for, whether I need a stand-in expert to do deep research, help me curate messages, things like that. So I'm very much in a seat, probably behind many of you or just on par with many of you. So I don't have any advanced knowledge here. So this is totally me walking into this blind, just so everybody's aware.
Yeah. So that's a great segue. Let's do our second poll, and then we'll actually, and then there'll be this exercise where I'm going to work with Michael. We're going to walk through this framework. I'll share it with the crowd, and we'll see if, and then we'll provide a tool for implementing the framework, a free tool that we built for this exercise. So
Spencer, let me
all right,
jump in real quick and just say
yeah,
that poll number 1 is showing instead of the second poll.
okay, let me go ahead and launch our second poll. I wonder why. I wonder if I have to close the other poll. Oh, here we go. Stop sharing. I bet that's what it is. There we go. Launch. Okay. All right. So this is an exercise that Leonard, it's a condensed exercise that Leonard does with CRE agents enterprise clients. It is understanding, like level setting where they are with AI. And so I'm going to do this with you now, Michael. The first question is, which best describes how you're currently working with AI? Now, you don't have to answer like one of these 5.
Yeah.
Describe for everyone on the call, how are you and your team currently using or working with this technology?
I would put it right in the middle of I use AI occasionally, and I'm experimenting with building workflows and automations. I think I use it incessantly all day. It assists me in a lot of things, but I'm using it to help answer questions, or I'll dump invoices or Excel files and have it, spit out answers. So I'm somewhat in the middle of
Great.
that.
Joe, where are you at?
Yeah, I'm probably similar. I've been on the test platform for CRE agents as well. So definitely trying to tinker and experiment, but probably in the middle as well.
Yeah, good. I think you're experimenting. You've actually built some pretty cool stuff. So You're more than just an AI, an occasional AI user. Leonard, we don't even need to ask you. Let's go to the
I feel
second
left
question.
out. I wanted to say I lead AI strategy and implementation.
In other words, I've never used AI.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So question two, I don't even need to ask this of Michael, but any AI related training and yeah, go ahead.
Other than showing up to your place in Miami and having you go, look at how cool this is and going through it. I mean, other than that, no, I've never had deep or individual training other than
Here's the question I think is the most important one on the four or five, however many we have. What is the biggest challenge? So think about your organization, your properties, your team. What's the
yeah.
biggest challenge for you, either personally, but also as a firm, to
Yeah.
implementing AI?
Yeah, as just broadly as a startup, it's like you wear so many hats, there's so many things coming at you, and there's opportunity there, but there's just not enough bandwidth to spend the time to implement it. So for me, like the biggest challenge is like dedicating that time or finding out where to go or finding that resource. Because every day it's just like things come at you. Again, we're a shop of four people. And so you wear every hat. And so the ability to, step out of it and work on the business using a framework like what you're about to present and getting these flowing, that's really the biggest challenge I've had in the last year plus, especially when we're so intense with everything right now. So
Yeah, and Joe, anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, I'd just say like education around, what's out there. Like you mentioned ChatGPT and some of these ones that everybody knows, but just really getting educated on how to use multiple systems or one system.
Yeah, so my impression is first off, there's a lack of trust about the output. And by the way, that's actually more of a function of the tool that you're using than it is necessarily the technology. When I was 14 years old, if I can tell a story, when I was 14 years old, I was an apprentice plumber. So in those days, you could start work when you were 14. This is actually the days when I grew up in Idaho, where um, like 8 and 9 year olds, 10 year olds during the summer, they'd go work on farms. But okay, I'm getting. But the point is, so I started at 14, and the plumber that I worked with, he said, Spencer, there's one rule: use the right tool for the job, and you won't get hurt. Okay, and I think the quality of the output in of this technology is often wrong because either the wrong tool or an incomplete understanding of what is required of that tool in order to produce an optimal output. In fact, I have a different framework that's probably for a different workshop about how to produce an optimal framework. It's about the instructions, the data, and the tool that is available to produce that output. If you get those three things right, you'll actually have an optimal output. That easier said than done. So that's number three. That's the biggest challenge. How about this one, Michael? If you could snap your fingers and have one thing, and Joe, if you want to chime in instead of Michael, if one thing that you could automate, it'd be off your plate. What would it be?
God, that would be off my plate that I can automate. I'll give one that's just on repeat because there's a lot of different things. It would be to get to an actual deal, like an actual submittal of an LOI, not miss deals. Make sure that we're automating that whole process. That would be the biggest thing right now. That's like on repeat that we keep fumbling because of lack
Yeah.
of attention to it. So getting that going would be huge.
Joe, would
Jack,
you
you may ask.
have a different answer?
I think that's a great one. I know we're about to get into like the budget for this year too, and doing kind of like a monthly budget cadence. And so I think like if we could find ways to make that process more automated, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, I was working with a client yesterday, and she is the link between the property management group and the reporting group. And her job is basically to take what the property management team sends and turn it into a format that the asset management group and the investor relations group and the reporting group need. And so much low hanging fruit in
Yeah.
that, a
Let
ton
me
of
add
low
one.
hanging fruit in that.
Let me add one more because we got done it and we'll probably get back into it this year, hopefully, is managing capital calls and draws and invoice aggregation. That is monstrous. And it's a big headache. to manage. So
Yeah.
I think that could be a prime opportunity.
Joe?
And if I could just add one more
Yeah.
on the like marketing and branding side too, there is a lot of content things that take time and they're not, so specific to commercial real estate, but essential to the business. And so some of that seems like low-hanging fruit too, potentially.
Good. Michael, just a quick question. If you were to quantify, and Leonard's like, don't quantify this, but I am going. If you were to quantify how much more you get done today versus pre-AI, is it still
Oh,
1-to-1, or do you feel
no,
like
I'm
you've got
way
any
more.
multiplication on this?
Even though I'm not using it like to the full capabilities, God, I think at least 3x more efficient
Oh,
just
interesting.
based on
Okay.
how I can, it's communication or it's going doing deep research on something, like all that stuff that used to distract and take up time, I've been able to sort of optimize. Now I'm nowhere near where I should be, I think, but that's kind of where I think I am.
Yeah, so I shared the results of the poll. I hope everyone sees it and you find it fascinating. 70% of you are using AI just occasionally, but without a systemized approach. Hopefully, we can change the systemized approach piece today. Most of you haven't taken AI training, which makes sense. There's not a lot of them out there. We at AI Edge, A.CRE has a training program called AI Edge where we train, and that's just relatively nascent. The biggest challenge is that's interesting. There is not a clear winner. Don't know where to start is the number one, but barely. It's 46%, whereas lack of trust 43 and skill gap 42. That's really interesting. And then if you could automate one thing, there's a whole bunch of them in there. What we'll do for everyone who's listening is we'll take those items, we'll drop them into AI, we'll turn them into a list, and we'll share them with everyone who listens. And now that'll get you some ideas for like what are the sort of things that others are thinking about automating that I also might be able to automate. So we'll share that with the group. And then the last one is like how transformational has the technology been? It's a very squishy question. It's interesting. It runs along a normal curve. For me, I'm probably in the 9, 10. But I love finding ways to be more efficient. So this is just, puts that on steroids. All right, let's get into this. We're now 30 minutes in, and I'm going to stop sharing and I'll share my screen and let's get into the actual framework, the meat of the exercise. So what we are going to do is we're going to go through a 5-step framework. And the 5 steps are understand the work that you do. Okay, that's step 1. And ironically, what's crazy to me, as I've talked to the thousands of people over the last year, most people don't really understand the work that they do. They say things like, I put together a quarterly report. That's not the work you do. That's the deliverable. The work that you do is you receive an inbound email from your property manager for asset ABC. That's the work that you do is you receive that and do something with it. You create a folder, you open a file, you populate boxes, you extract attributes from one box and put it into another, right? And for simplicity's sake, I'm going to call those things tasks. Although Leonard calls them steps, and he has different steps when he actually does process mapping at more of an enterprise scale. But for individual, let's just simplify this. The work that you do, I like to break out into deliverables. Those are the things that you can think of as gates, you can like whatever, but deliverables are the end result of some series of tasks. And I'll just simplify it to tasks. Tasks are the things you do, deliverables are the things you pump out. And if you say, I build a financial model, that is a deliverable, that is not the task. The task is open it up and create a header and outline out my model and then build my investment cash flow section and then build up my operating cash flow section, my reversion cash flow section. And if you're an accelerator member, you're well aware of the frameworks that we've taught for building financial models. But the first step of this is understand the work that you do, audit your work. The second step, and then Michael, we'll get into you and we'll do the exercise. The second step is quantify the work that you do. Okay. So when I say quantify, It's understand the impact of taking that work off your plate. And that's incredibly important because otherwise you end up attempting to make more efficient something that's not worth making more efficient. Now, there is uh, a, a, a revenue impact of every task, and or there's an expense reduction. You can also measure this in terms of, say, time saved. It almost doesn't matter what like the metric is that you're using. What you want is you want to quantify the impact of automating or partially automating a task, not a deliverable, a task. Now, the tasks roll up to the deliverable level, but you want to measure the impact of that. Once you've measured the impact, so now you've got called a list of things. And by the way, the best way to do this is spend the next 6 weeks and each day take inventory of what you did, the tasks, and what deliverables those tasks are associated with. And as you do that day after day after day, you'll start creating this list of things that you can then measure impact of. Once we've quantified the impact and we have a list of some tasks, and it doesn't have to be comprehensive, just you got to start somewhere. Then we're going to identify solutions for making those tasks more efficient. And now this gets to like, Spencer, this is so obvious. Okay, yeah, it is obvious. And yet 70% of you said, I don't have a systematic way to do this. And so this is the framework I use. So once I understand the work that I do, I understand the impact of automating it. Then I look at how can I take a single task and make it more efficient. And in the early days, it was things like, remember I mentioned as a young broker, I'd reach out to 5 times as many people, a silly little automation. And I've shared this with some of you who are on. So I wanted to send out personal emails. I thought phone calls, first, phone calls just don't work for me, okay? I either want to be face-to-face or I want to send out something via, not email, via snail mail. This is early 2000s, okay? So I'm an old guy. And so I started by handwriting letters, and then that was a task on my list. And I'm like, man, for every 100 handwritten letters I send out, I get 1/10 of one sale. So that means I needed to send out 1,000 handwritten letters to get one sale. By the way, there's a step between the handwritten letters, a sale actually knocked on a farmer's door, and you can't really automate that well, although there's ways I could automate the organization of those. But the point is, so how do I send out 1,000 letters in a month? Handwritten. And the reason for handwritten is then it feels natural. And it's like, okay, Spencer spent some time to send me a handwritten letter. And so I took a black Sharpie and I wrote a template letter. And then I realized that, and if you Xerox, using an old-fashioned term, if you take a copy of a Sharpie, it looks like a handwritten letter. It's a simple little tiny thing. It's identifying a solution. And I took something that was taking me a lot of time, and I could send out 100 times the letters then in the same amount of time that I did before. That's a little silly little example. Let me fast forward to, I mentioned IC memos. Not IC memos, prepping for investment committee. So I worked at a life co. Many of you know which life co. In fact, there may be some of my former coworkers, and if there are, hello. I wish I could see you and say hello. And many of you know that Spencer did this. Okay, so we had this thing, call it the investment committee memo, although we called it committee sheets. And producing the committee sheets was a massive, massive headache. It would take us hours and hours and hours and hours. And on top of that, anytime something changed in the underwriting, it would have a ripple effect across this Word document. It was just a Word template. On top of that, I also had to create this other document, which I don't even remember the name of it. It was a document that you'd circulate. Oh, and by the way, we would print all of these out and hand them to everyone at the investment committee. I mean, that's so I created an Excel macro that would take the contents of the Excel file, which I realized all of the attributes to the deal lived in this Excel file. And so I just created an Excel macro that would take the values from that Excel file and would populate a Word document. And took a task that my peers, 8 hours, 10 hours, and me, I'd do in 20 minutes. And so there were some other things I had to do to prep. I needed to do a PowerPoint presentation. I couldn't really figure out a way how to automate that. But the solution for me was, hey, a macro. Now, many of you go, I don't know how to do VBA, Spencer, which, by the way, I didn't either. You know how I did it? I'd go to the internet, back this is the pre-AI, I'd go to the internet and I'd find snippets of code, and then I would use the macro recorder. And between the snippets of code I'd find in the internet and the macro recorder, I would be able to do my own VBA coding. Because I'd never learned how to code VBA. Nowadays, AI does all that and is incredibly good at the type of coding that the people on this call do. Okay, and so that's just, that's another example. And I could go down the list. But this third step is, once you have the list of things, and that's the key, then it's just a brainstorming exercise. Now, many of you will go, okay, well, Spencer, I don't know, I don't even know where to start in the brainstorming exercise. This tool, because I knew that was going to come up, that was going to be on your mind. And so we've created a tool. It looks pretty dang good. And that non-technical people, I didn't use any of our developers, the A.CRE agents, to build this. So this was built by the non-technical real estate people that are on this call and otherwise. And that includes ideas. And hopefully from that, together with your own brain, together with communities, that's what we're trying to build at AI Edge, is like a community of people who are like thinking about this and giving each other ideas. Together with community, you can begin to identify solutions. So that's step 3. Okay, you go, well, aren't we done? No, we're not done. Because just because you identify a solution doesn't mean that you should implement it. I should actually mention on the identify solutions. We're focused on AI for this call, so I'm gonna keep the focus there. But oftentimes identifying a solution is not a technology. So for instance, I shouldn't say this. For instance, you are a director and you're doing work that your analyst could do. And your relative cost is probably twice that of your analyst. You should delegate it to your analyst. And by the way, there's a lot of outsourced solutions where you can reduce this cost. Again, this is not a new concept at all. We've been delegating since the beginning of time. But many of us don't think about that until we actually have identified the task, we understand the impact of it. Delegation is a solution. Another one is just simply simplify and optimize. So Elon Musk, you may have heard this, when they were working to build the reusable rocket, have some automation principles. And the first 2, I think, are the most relevant to us. Number 1, make requirements less dumb. Like, what? Do we really need this? And then delete the part or process that's unnecessary. And so if you have the authority to make the requirements less dumb or delete a process, that's probably where you start. And then you get into, can I delegate and or can I automate with this? So that's step 3. Step 4, now we prioritize. Okay, so we've got, it can feel overwhelming. And I think why many of us are stuck on the call is because we don't know where to start. Well, how do you climb a mountain? One step at a time. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So it is with doubling your output, 10xing your output. It's one task at a time. But you got to know where to start. And you start with the highest impact task. Okay, so what's the task that if I snap my fingers would produce the greatest result for me? I would be the happiest if that thing was automated and is the easiest to implement. We call that feasibility. And so you're going to do this exercise where you understand the impact already. And now you're going to look at the tasks and you're going to say, okay, what is feasible? What's easy? What's easiest? And you pair those two things together. And if you come from the software development side, you know from the agile approach, impact and feasibility. I mean, this is a framework that you've probably already developed. But it's this idea, okay, what is highest impact? What's the easiest to accomplish? That's where we start. And you just rank order those. Now, in the development side, they've got like this whole matrix with impact and feasibility and have names like, look, we're real estate Neanderthals. Let's not get there. Let's just simply create a list. And the list is ranked by impact and feasibility and impact and how easy it is to automate. Once we prioritize, then it's about executing. And executing does not happen overnight. That's another reason why you start with one task, because it just gets overwhelming. It's like, I'm gonna automate end to end my investment committee memo. It's not, no. You're going to get bogged down in one or two steps and you're going to say, this doesn't work, and you're going to stop. That one task that's your highest impact, the easiest to do, that's where you start. You start with an implementing step. That's when you're building the solution. And building the solution might be signing up for the service that you can delegate it to. Implementing might be reducing, eliminating the dumb requirements and or the part or process that you don't need. But also implementing is either building the AI tool or the automation tool, or learning to use it. That's implementing. Then you get into iterating. So let's say that it takes you a week to implement. I promise you it's not going to work, or at least it's not going to work as well as you think or want it to. And that's because you haven't iterated on it. And so iteration is you test, you learn, you refine, you do again. And that iterating step, depending on the complexity of the task that you are optimizing, automating, might take you a few weeks, it might take you a few months. And that's okay. What you want to do is you want to be testing, you want to be iterating, you want to be measuring to see if you are hitting your expectations. Expectation is it delivering the impact that I thought? And at such point in time, oh, and by the way, when you start iterating is when you introduce your second task to implement. So now it becomes an assembly line. And over months, and I believe everyone on this call, if you start implementing this, you'll be able to double your output from where you are today in the next year. But imagine where we all are 10 years from now if we had this sort of discipline, where it's just this assembly line. All right, so that is the framework, Michael. Let's talk about your business. Everyone on the call, Michael is your proxy. Okay, so imagine I'm asking you these questions and either answer them in your head or answer them on paper or answer them in a ChatGPT chat and have ChatGPT summarize the results of your answers. The first thing I want you to ask in your head is, what if I could double my output? What would that mean? And what would I do with that time? And I'm actually going to share something if I could. I know I was going to go right into Michael, but you might ask, like, why am I so passionate about this? And yeah, it's a game in part. Like this whole assembly line thing is just fun for me. I think so. Part of it is it's something I enjoy. Part of it is, yeah, I mean, if I could make more money in less time, or if I could spend less money in the same amount of time, like, yeah, absolutely. Right? Those are obvious. But there's actually a reason that all of us are, the reason you're on this call, and you may not even realize this is the reason you're on this call. And I learned this principle when I was a young broker. And the principle is this, and some of you may have heard this principle, and I hope you internalize it. As we get older, the value of a dollar to us as the person decreases, and the value of a minute or an hour or a day increases. And there reaches this moment in time when the value of an hour is almost infinite, and maybe even infinite. And the value of a dollar is effectively zero. And I learned this when I was a young broker because I had an opportunity to take a crack at arguably the most valuable property in our market. And I had in tow a client that was arguably the best buyer for that property. Out-of-state developer, deep pockets, quick close, big number. And I'm gonna say, and the land was owned by a farmer, and he lived in this old dilapidated farmhouse on this farm. And me, young, early 20s, thinking I'm a hot shot, I'm like, oh man, this is gonna be massive commission, easy deal, because I got the best offer in the market. And how could this guy turn this down? He's gonna be a millionaire. And I'm gonna call him John, although I don't remember his name. And myself and my client actually both sat down at John's kitchen table, and we just had this conversation. And John was a talker. He's into his 90s. It was just him living there alone, and he is just talking away. And so we spent an hour just talking to John, and he's just enjoying this conversation. And I'm kind of a little antsy. It's like, okay, let's get a deal. I want to present this offer. And so I said, John, I got an offer I don't think you can refuse. And I presented it to him. And he looked at it and just spent maybe 15 seconds looking at it, and he pushed it aside and he's like, Spencer, I don't want to spend the last year of my life negotiating the sale of my farm. And that hit me. Um, he was at a moment in time, which, by the way, my first reaction was like, man, you could have a mansion up on the hill. What are we talking about? But then, like, as I contemplated, like, the reality is he had reached a moment where that hour was really valuable to him because he doing the things that he wanted to do, and money meant nothing, meant absolutely nothing to him. And I am now, I'm midlife, and I'm past that middle point where I really value time. Joe just had a baby, and so you're starting, Joe, to feel it. Like all of us, the four of us all are all starting to feel it, and I'm feeling it more and more. And it's not an existential crisis. Don't worry about Spencer here, but I'm realizing that how I can contribute to the industry is helping people unlock time, our most valuable asset, and I genuinely mean it. And it frustrates me a little bit that too many of us are stuck when there's this technology that could unlock time at scale like no other technology ever has. All right, let's go into Michael. Um, I prepped Michael a little bit, but not completely. So bear with him if we go. So here's how we start with auditing tasks. We want to identify first a deliverable that will be impactful. And as you and I were prepping before this, you said something that was interesting to me. You said, we're losing deals because we're showing up too late. And that to me said, okay, there's a bottleneck early that we need to solve. And so I suggested to you, how about we start early in, and we're talking your acquisition business, although I think this also relates to your development business. Let's start early. Are you still in agreement? We start early. And if so, what would be the first, we'll call it deliverable. This would be like the first milestone of your sourcing process. What would you say that is?
A cohesion of emails, all from relevant brokers in my space to all arrive simultaneously in one location.
So those are that's information, right? So we call those attributes. Mm-hmm. That's data. That data you are going to do something with. But ultimately, what are you driving towards?
Oh, I'm driving towards an LOI submission.
An LOI submission, right? And let's actually back up even further. Before you can submit an LOI, what do you have to do? Let's kind of walk us from the LOI back to that deluge of emails from brokers or your off-market deals you're talking to. Walk us back.
Yeah, so you're just constantly out, what I would call prospecting. We call prospecting. You're out looking for opportunities. You probably sift through, if you have the time, which sometimes we lose the time, you sift through hundreds of deals, maybe 1,000 a year, sift through, you have your buy box.
Yep.
You look preliminarily for what might qualify for that, from there, if something looks good.
Let me stop you really quick. And this is for everyone else on the call. So this is why I say oftentimes we don't make note of the work that we do. So you said two words.
Yeah.
That if we were to spend an hour on this, we would dig into further. The first is you say we're out looking for deals. Okay. There are actual things you're doing, and every one of those things you're doing, some of them you could optimize, some of them you could automate, some of them they are just what they are. I mean, I just had to knock doors. Okay.
Yeah.
So the second thing you said was, but it was another kind of squishy term that actually described a lot of stuff. It's like the yada yada.
Qualifying stuff into the buy box.
Yeah. If we were to spend a long time, we would actually dig into those, because those chunks are the chunks that probably are more variable. You're doing a variety of things and it's dependent on the deal, but almost certainly those chunks possess, again, we're using a simple term, task.
Yeah, lots of individual steps.
Lots of individual things. So I keep going.
After we get a preliminary, and there's people that are, after you get a preliminary deal, it gets.
And what does a preliminary deal look like?
So, for us, outdoor hospitality, we're even into hotels. So anything near a bucket list outdoor destination within, say, and it varies, I'll be generic, let's say, 25 miles from the entry point of some major bucket list destination. It can be
Okay.
RV, campground, hotel,
So you're describing, call it your buy box,
buy box,
and you're going to
size.
receive information prior to that will help you determine whether it fits your buy box,
Correct.
right? How long would you say right now it takes from the moment a deal arrives in your inbox or you get a phone call from someone, whether on market or off market, to the moment where you know if it fits your buy box or not? How much time is spent?
Just on that one, because there's a lot of dead processes in between. So just that one.
Yeah.
Um, God, all in all, probably 2 hours, I would say.
Okay. Yeah. How many times do you have to do that 2 hour process in order to get one deal that fits your buy box?
We probably take, I would say, five-ish deals seriously a month. So 5 times a month.
How many of those five? So five of those. So you're looking at 25 deals to get five that fit your buy box.
Yes,
Okay.
correct. So what, yeah, to get to one, it typically, well, no, I would say 20, probably 20. We're pretty selective. So, and this is not a
But are you selective because you don't have time, or you're selective because you're selective?
both. I would say time is a problem, and then the industry that we're in is not as, I would say, I guess sophisticated as the rest of the more established asset classes. So there's a lot more noise you would get in packages than you would in others. So,
But let's imagine that you're going to look at 25 deals.
mhm,
So that means deal comes in and you're going to spend enough time to say pass or spend more time on it. Okay.
correct.
Okay. Fit check, let's call it. You're spending 2 hours per one of those. You're going to do 25 of those to get five that you'd consider. That means you're spending 50 hours a month
Yeah.
on the tasks that go from deal arrives to the point where I say, yeah, yay or nay.
Yep.
I bet, actually, I know. I say I know because Leonard and I, this is a common portion of the process that I would say probably 50% of people we talk to want to work on the sourcing. Probably because it's a revenue generator. Because let's now quantify it further. 50 hours. So there's two ways to quantify this if we want to understand it. Actually, there's three ways to quantify this for impact. The first is just simply hour. It's 50 hours. Okay, and you can say, all right, and I have X number of people on my team, and so I'm spending some percentage of my time on this. That's one way you can quantify it.
Mhm.
The next way that you can quantify it, the way I prefer, is a dollar amount. Now, not all milestones, deliverables, tasks can be quantified with a dollar amount, but if you can, that to me is the optimal. So let's say, what's your average acquisition size?
We're targeting 8 to 10 million.
8 to 10 million. All right. So let's say you're talking $100,000 acquisition fee. I'm assuming you don't have to tell us, but I would imagine like a market for this is probably a 1% acquisition fee.
Mhm.
So this work is building towards a $100,000 fee. If I were a member of the team, so let's say I'm not Michael and I'm not like revenue driven. I'm more, let's say I am an analyst. Like, why do I care if I'm an analyst? It's actually not about revenue. It's actually about expense reduction. So imagine as an analyst, I cost $50 an hour. That means that task is costing my company 50 times 50, $2,500 a month. If I can cut that in half, I've just saved my company $1,250 per month. And you go, well, maybe you're a big company, like, what do I care? Here's why you care. If you are the person in your peer group that is doing things twice as fast, you're going to get bigger bonuses. You're going to get better annual reviews. You're going to be more irreplaceable at your firm, job security. On top of that, when you go out into the market and you're looking for a job, you can say, I do these processes twice as fast as my peers. Here are the tools that I use to prove that. And you're going to be more valuable in the marketplace when you go out looking for jobs. If you're a student, and there's some percentage of you are students, and you're going, well, Spencer, I can't do this until I actually start. Yeah, you absolutely can. If you're an accelerator member, you've already learned processes that exist. Find ways to multiply your output. That makes you more valuable in the marketplace. Not to mention the fact that it gives back time to you, and time's our most valuable asset. Okay, so $100,000 is the value of one closed deal. how many deals fit your buy box that ultimately would close?
How many deals would fit
Well,
in
so
my
here's what you told me. You said you did one deal last year. You want to do two this year.
Yes, 2 to 3.
If your numbers hold, that means you looked at 60 deals last year to produce one close.
Yeah.
This year, you need to look at twice that many deals to do two closes.
Yeah.
And so you need to reduce the time that it takes to look at a deal by half, and you'll double the number of closes. And again, like many of you on the call are like, this is so simple, Spencer. Yeah, that's the point. Like this is not rocket science here. This is a very simple framework. It's really about just being having a framework, sticking to it, being disciplined around it. All right, so I think we've quantified that piece, Michael. Now let's talk about what possible solutions that exist. Let's start at the ingestion phase. So in order to get to 60 deals that you're going to underwrite in 2026, rather than the 120. I'm sorry, I did the math wrong. You underwrote, you looked at 60 deals that fit your buy box last year. You need to look at 120 this year. That means, and what did you say? Only 1/5 of those. So that means you need to see 600 deals in 2026, or don't show up late so much and increase your hit rate. Okay, but let's imagine that your hit rate's the same. That you're going to close one out of the 60 that you select, and that means you actually looked at 300. So you closed one out of 300. It should be closer to one out of 100 to be like more consistent. But okay, one out of 300. We want to get you to. We're going to stick with that one out of 300. We want to double the number of deals that you can see. That means you need to have more broker conversations. That means you need to be on more mailing lists, so you receive more inbound leads. That may mean you also may need to do some proactive off-market outreach. And so what solutions exist for that? Well, for instance, we could get a list, fairly simple thing. We could get a list of every outdoor hospitality asset within X number of miles of the bucket list destinations that are on your list. That's a simple thing to get. Once we have that, then we could use what's called skip tracing. Skip tracing is where you attempt to find the warm body and contact information for the person who controls that asset. You are lucky that you're in an asset type that isn't particularly institutional. Therefore, the warm body is probably not sitting behind layers and layers of entities. It's probably behind 2 or 3 entities, and sometimes may be owned by a sole proprietor in a random scenario. It would make Leonard cringe as a former real estate tax guy. But and so in our experience, about 40% of properties you can get to a warm body. I would guess in your property type, it's probably 60, 70%. So we could take that list, we could identify warm bodies, and then we could have some sort of proactive outreach and create a new inbound lead channel. That's one possible solution. And then you go to feasibility. You're like, okay, how easy is it to implement that? We got to get the list, which means we've got to go. There are lists that exist out there. That's probably medium difficulty. And there's going to be some costs associated with that. You'd throw that in call it the difficulty. The skip tracing is easy. Okay, that's an engine that we've already built, and those are out there. There are tools that you can use. There's a cost every single name you're gonna pay for, but there's tools that you can use. So that's easy. So I would, and then there's the outreach. That's the hard one, because you could send out emails and no one responds, and then you got to get into that. So I would label that idea, that solution, as low to medium feasibility. But I would rate that as high impact, because that exercise could potentially double the number of deals that you saw. But what are other ways that you could double the number of deals? What are you doing for broker outreach right now?
So we have a regular cadence, probably once a month. We'll reach out and just reconnect and see what's going on. So that's really the extent of it, in terms of
what percentage of brokers who have deals like yours would you guess you know you?
What percentage?
Yeah,
Probably in our space,
just a guess.
probably if I had to guess, 30%.
Okay.
Probably more out
So
there.
another option is you double the number of brokers who are aware of you and are sending you deal flow. And if we're a smaller group, we'd actually probably do a little, we'd get some of our broker friends to get ideas for that outreach exercise. Brokers love the phone. I don't love the phone because it's less efficient. I have a phone call, it's going to take me 30 minutes. I'd rather, right? But sometimes that's what you have to do. So then you ask yourself, what can I take off my plate in another area of my business that would free me up to have more of these conversations? And now you double the number of broker conversations you have. That means theoretically, you double the number of deal flow. So that's one way that we could double your output simply by increasing your lead engine from 300 to 600. Now, there's some other ways. The second is you had mentioned to me your hit rate now is 1 out of 300. It should be closer to 1 out of 100. And you were
Probably a
diagnosing
little
the reason
high,
is
but
you're
yeah.
showing up late. Talk through everyone on the call. Like, what's happening this show up late thing?
It's, our process isn't fully, again, we're a small shop. We're four of us, again, getting started out. We got our first deal online. There's still stabilization. And so it could go a week or two before we go and check back in for the next opportunity. And so it just lost it. We've probably seen, I think, four this last year that were perfect. And we showed up twice, LOIs signed that day or the next day, and so we missed it. We missed them, and it's very frustrating. But that's what's happened last year.
Yeah, and is that a bottleneck in the time from lead to decision?
Actually, it's a bottleneck from lead to decision. Yeah, I guess it is because it does if it shows up and nobody's there to receive it, or it never showed up. We found it, and we just weren't on a list.
Oh, so I mean that's even an easier one to fix. So we could
Yeah.
probably take the 1 to 300 down to 1 to 200 simply by having a notification engine. Okay, so
Yes.
this would be a build. Some of you on the call are familiar with N8N, Pipe Dream, Replit, now ChatGPT's Agent Builder. All of these non-technical people in an afternoon could build a notification engine for this. What you'd want to do is you would want to set up an email address where all of the leads come in. So where are you're going to be signed up for the lists. By the
Yes.
way, you probably could just go sign up for twice the number of lists and increase your leads. It sounds like to me though increasing leads could be also an issue because you're
Yeah,
struggling
I
to.
don't know that that's the core of the problem. I think the core of the problem is some type of mechanism, whether it's automation or there's time dedicated to the qualification, finding them on time and getting qualified, like bringing that through to that point is probably our biggest challenge. And that's
Yeah.
the focus, I think, of this year is cleaning that up, probably this quarter, based on what we've talked about. So,
Yeah. So again, we're just in identifying solutions. So one solution is you route all inbound leads to an acquisitions at firmridge.com. And
mm,
then you build, it could be Zapier could do it as well. Although personally, I would build it on Replit. And the reason I'd build it on a Replit, and then I could also have my pipeline report there.
yeah,
So a lead would automatically arrive. It would shoot you a Slack message. So Michael's in Slack. It could shoot you an email. It could shoot you whatever. And so it would notify you, hey, new deal. And if you wanted, you could also have it read the OM,
yes.
understand like a very
Here's,
preliminary buy box, and immediately pass on something that doesn't fit. Maybe it's outside of your dollar amount. Maybe it's the wrong property type. Maybe it's not within the radius of your bucket list destinations, and it would
yep.
automatically filter for you those deals. And that's the sort of build in terms of feasibility. Oh, go ahead. You want to say
Well,
something?
no, I was going to say the dream would be something shows up and immediately within a half, it can review everything, and then all of a sudden I have notification or the team has notification that there's something that qualifies.
Yeah. So
Right, like just straight through. If there's a, and it's probably feasible. I mean, I can.
yeah, that's the end state. So too often you're falling into the trap of going. What I really want is this, and you let perfect be the enemy of good. Okay, so you start with something that has an incremental help, and then as you implement and you iterate and you prove that it works, then you layer on. And where I would start with you is simply a notification engine,
Yep.
and maybe a very subtle screen. It's high
When you say
feasibility.
notification engine, are you saying a notification that's pre-screened? Here's a qualifying lead, not just a notification
But a
that
very
will
basic
show up.
qualifying lead, because the more you want it to dig in,
Yeah.
the lower the feasibility or lower how easy it is, right? So if one is identifying the solution, you're absolutely right. You build some sort of notification engine, and then I would argue that qualifying engine is a separate thing, and you could potentially build both of those at once. I would start with a notifying engine. That would be the
Okay.
very first task you do. And then you would layer in your next thing once you figure out that that's working. The next thing I would do is build some sort of qualifying engine. And then that qualifying engine could get better and better and better to the point where one day it could draft your LOI for you. Now,
Amazing.
if
Yeah.
I where I go from that is I don't like that. I want to have a human in the loop. I want to validate inputs, and I think most on the call are that way. But you could, you go down the road that you could conceivably get to that. So, okay, I
Yeah.
think we've identified a few solutions. If you're on the call listening, we were on sourcing, and we don't have time to get into other areas, but this relates to everything you do, and it's not just real estate. But certainly, when it comes to real estate, from sourcing into your closing and due diligence, into asset management, portfolio management, fund management, investor relations, all the way down through dispositions into brokerage and advice. I mean, this framework works. We just happen to focus on a use case that's specific to Michael. Let's prioritize. Let's rank one. And then we'll conclude. I'm going to share the 2 free things that we'll send around to the participants that will hopefully help you to implement the framework. And there's some questions that are in the chat that, Leonard, I'm hoping maybe you could flag the questions that we should respond
Yep. And
to.
there's a couple that I've been responding to as we go, but some of these deeper ones we'll get to in Q&A.
Yeah, great. All right, let's prioritize one for you.
Mm.
Okay. I think your highest impact is the notification engine. I think you start there.
hmm
And I think you expect to add the pre-screen soon thereafter.
Got it.
And so the first iteration of that would simply be, it's going to send you a notification in Slack that a new deal has arrived.
Got it. So I just want to reiterate something from my end, which is, when I think of AI, and so a lot of this is like, oh, I'm going to come in, to be simplistic about it, I'm going to push a button and all these things are going to happen. And I can't start because I don't know how to get there. What you're saying is things aren't perfect yet. It's like anything, like learning Excel, like learning how to underwrite deals, like learning how to, work in the industry. This is a process-oriented thing where you take it step by step. It's imperfect, but you just start along the pathway. So that's what we're doing here with this process.
Just
That's
get
what
started. You need your first thing. Now, many on
yeah, love
listening
that.
might or watching might say, "Well, that's not AI, Spencer. That's like we call it RPA, robotic process automation. It's basically email arrives and then code takes that email and then does something in some notification place. Maybe it sends an email notification to you, or in your case, it's going to send a notice in Slack, or Teams would be another example of the sort of place that could send a notification. Here's why AI is such a big deal. In a previous world, pre-2024, because coding wasn't good enough to do this even in 2023, maybe even pre-2025. To build what Michael and I just explored would have required paying a developer to do it. Would have been expensive, probably so expensive that it really wouldn't have made it worth the while. And then someone's got to maintain that thing, and us on this call are not technical people. And so it's not our job to maintain this thing. What this technology has unlocked is the ability for any one of us on the call to build exactly what we all just discussed. And in fact, Michael, you could build that in a half hour between meetings. It really is that simple. So that's where I would prioritize. Here's what I would suggest. Let's work together on it. And then we can do a follow-up, either a workshop or a video sharing exactly how we built it.
Yeah, I think we take this all the way through to the dream
Yeah.
and just keep updating folks along the way.
We do a watch me build. And I think once, for those who haven't experienced like the power of the build side, we can kind of demonstrate that. Now, not everyone's a builder, and that's where Leonard comes in. So to give a shout out to Leonard. What Leonard does is he works with people who are like, I don't have time to build, and he maps out their process, identifies what to build first, picks those things, and then actually builds it. All right, let's finish this up in this way. So then we finish with execute and iterate. We'll do that with you. Here is what everyone is going to get. So we built an app. We call it the Multiplier Framework. We're very, very creative. And you can use this to become systemized, to bring discipline to this process. By the way, non-technical people built this app. Anyone on this call could build this app. It has bugs. We're working through those, so bear with us. But in the spirit of A.CRE, where some of our early models at A.CRE, Michael and I released, and they've been updated hundreds of times, either bugs or feature requests. This is a similar thing. Free to the world, use it. We hope that it helps you multiply your output, at least double that in 2026. I'm going to show you what I built for Michael. So we have this concept of a roadmap. A roadmap are the first things that we want to work on. So in your case, the roadmap would be like that inbound lead to LOI. And this thing here, I put Q1 2026. I think we could probably execute everything on the list. I did this in advance, so the deliverables don't line up. Shoot. Okay, here we go. So it starts out, I have this audit step. And you'll see the first deliverable I put is select deal to pursue. I think we called that fit check or the filter. And then I created some basic tasks. Now we could create a new deliverable. So let's say that you had another one, which was, you mentioned draw requests. We could create a new deliverable. And then we integrated AI with it. So what'll happen is I click this button, it actually sends the deliverable to an AI agent that then looks at the draw request. Now I put no description, so it's not going to give us great output. It'll suggest a few tasks that may or may not be a fit. And then we can also just add our own tasks. Okay, so we do that. That would be the audit step. Then we have the quantify step. This is where we're going to set for each of the deliverables either a revenue or a savings value and how many times we expect to produce this deliverable every year. And that'll help us quantify that'll help us track progress during the execution phase. Then we have identify. And this is where you'll probably see us iterating in the coming months and years. And so please give feedback, just like many of you have with, say, like the all-in-one, okay? Think of this as the all-in-one in 2015. How can we help you identify tasks better? Now, this is what we've done so far. You click Find Solutions, and we've begun ingesting. These are just AI solutions that exist out there, okay? When we launch CRE agents here in the next, very soon, there will be, CRE agents has this concept of skills or tasks, and it does basically micro things for you. So whereas third-party tools are more macro, you would use it and then you would use it to do micro things. CRE agents is a compilation of micro things. A micro thing would be like, pull the 3-mile demographics for this address and then write a location summary. That would be an example of a CRE agent's task. Or we can do custom. So if you have a tool that is not on the list that you might think of as an idea, or if you're a prop tech founder and you're listening to this and you have a tool that we've missed, you can either drop it here and it'll actually go on this list in the back end of potential things that we should add for the third party, or just email us. You'll find a help, and in fact, need help. You'll click this here and just shoot us a note, probably technical support, and we can look to add that. Or we have the get AI recommendations. This is powered by Grok 3.1 Fast. And we could say things like, this assigns CAs for shortlisted deals. We open a Word doc and sign on the dotted line and then send back to broker, right? And you click this, what's being sent now to Grok is our context, the task itself and any description related to the task. And then we do a RAG search of this database of third-party tools. And it's going to send the most likely tools. It'll send 20 chunks. And then it's going to come back and it's going to recommend some options here. DocuSign, Adobe Acrobat Sign, Panda as possible solutions. Now, you got to then go several layers deeper and like, how do you implement this and so forth? But I'm just going to use, let's say, DocuSign. Once I do that, this is where we're going to measure feasibility. So it's going to ask, how familiar are you with this tool? I'm an expert. How difficult do you believe this implementation will be? I think it'll be easy. How much time do you think this will save? I don't know. Probably minor. I'll add the solution and it adds that there such that when I go to prioritize, now it's going to, I can rank by impact score. I can do a custom order, or I can just move these up myself. Okay. And then I select the ones that I want to be working on. And then I go to execute. And execute is going to have all of the tasks that are on our board and where they are in the stages of manual. Manual means we haven't started working. We're doing them manually right now. Implementation. Okay. Those are the things that we're identifying what tool, we're figuring out how to implement that tool. We're testing it to make sure it works. Then we move it to iterating. Oops, okay. And once it's in iterating, that's when we're going to be using it, learning what doesn't work, refining, continue, and until the moment where we're like, okay, this is on autopilot and we move to automate. And once it's at this automate stage, you're going to start seeing in your dashboard and otherwise your multiplier, your current multiplier, how many hours you've saved, time reduction. You'll see this on the dashboard. And then you can add more roadmaps. And over time, you can measure your multiplier effect. And what I would love is that this becomes a metric that each one of us personally track. And one day I show up to an interview and the interviewer is like, what's your multiplier effect? All right. Let me stop. Let's get to questions. The first question is, Leonard, if anyone on the call wants to work with you, we're going to circulate to them your contact information or whatever details in case they want that. What other questions, Leonard, did you see come through the chat that we should?
Yeah, there's a very interesting one right at the top saying, will using AI have the capability to replace analysts or make candidates that know AI a much better choice than candidates that do not? How can they describe that advantage to a prospective employer?
Yeah. So the first half of that question, will it replace analysts? You're going to get different answers. That's an opinion. So if Elon Musk was on here, he'd say absolutely, like none of us are going to do that stuff, and right. And then you have the entire other end of the spectrum, which is you need a human in the loop and nibbling around the edges, but absolutely won't replace an analyst. I fall somewhere in between. I think what the analyst does is going to dramatically change in the next 5 years. They may still have the title of analyst. I think dramatically change what they do. And I give this analogy of analysts today are on their hands and knees, digging holes and putting trees in these holes, and then packing the tree up and then watering it and fertilizing it, and then walking 10 feet over some direction that someone's told them, and they're digging another hole with their hands. And what are they actually doing? They're planting a forest. But they don't see the forest for the trees because they're so close. I think what happens is that digging the hole, that planting the tree, that packing the soil, that watering, that fertilizing, that's going to be done by a AI counterpart. And analysts, or whatever we end up calling them, will lift up and they'll be in a helicopter above the forest and they'll be guiding the direction Okay, we're planning too thick over here. We need to grow in this direction. I don't know anything about growing forests, by the way, but that my analogy I think still holds.
Spencer, if I can add a little bit more
Yeah,
there, I think,
please.
the interesting part about making candidates that understand AI, will they be a better choice? That's easy. I think the answer to that is absolutely yes. And what I have really come to appreciate about artificial intelligence is the ability to do or create or build things that you may not have been able to do previously. And so, as someone who's a real estate developer and an investor, and has this tax background, to now have the ability to go out and implement new processes that make my organization or other organizations more efficient, that becomes really valuable, having both the technical real estate piece, but now a little bit more of a technical around computer and computer language and ability to execute. And to the part about how do they describe that advantage to a prospective employer, I think that is fairly simple and straightforward. Is you talk about what did you build? You talk about what did you intend to do? How did that process go? What tools did you use? How much time did you save on that process? How much money did you save or did you create perhaps in the form of revenue? Or what did you do differently? Taking a process that you were doing before, you're now doing it differently. And being able to talk to those intelligently and walk somebody through that process and show them what the result is, positions you well in the
I
marketplace if
love
you're
that.
a good employer.
Um, I caught up with a friend last week. He's at one of the big shops. I won't name it because that shop is going through some turbulence, and he's concerned about job security. He's like, so he's just getting advice, and on top of that, like this is not a it's a tough time to be out in the job market. So he's getting input, and obviously this is on my mind, and I was prepping for the workshop, and so I shared just briefly the framework. And then as I was saying it, I'm thinking to myself, man, what a great way. Either you do one thing, and that one thing doubles the impact of something either for your employer or for other employers. That makes you more indispensable to your existing firm. And even if there's mass layoffs and you are one of them, you can now you send the thing you build or you share how you've multiplied yourself. It's gonna make you so much more competitive in the marketplace. So that's a great question. Any other questions, Leonard, that in the last 5 minutes that we should
Yeah, I
tackle?
mean, I do see quite a few questions coming in that are specific to what somebody's doing, whether it's brokerage, whether it's development, whether it's trying to tackle issues in live tech. And here's what I want to say.
Okay.
There are so many steps, there are so many processes. It's very difficult to answer that on a broad level. And I think it's really worthwhile for everyone to take time to peel back the onion and understand what it is that they do on a step-by-step basis. It is going to be very difficult for any one of us to say we're going to take Claude or ChatGPT or CRE agents or any of these tools and apply it across the spectrum immediately, and we've solved everything. And you're
Yeah.
really looking for opportunities to solve individual use cases step by step, and over time it starts to automate. And so we all have to be very prepared to spend our own time understanding what's going on and to spend some money um, to implement these solutions. And so, just know that this is kind of you're starting with a blank canvas and you're working bit by bit to start to fill out that canvas. We can't, fill it up all in one shot. So, I think some of these individual sectors or industries people are asking about, happy to connect offline at a different time and we can start to get into some of the nuances of those particular sectors.
Yeah, what's so inspiring to me is some of these early civilizations that would build these projects over sometimes millennia, but decades and generations. And we oftentimes have like, I need it now. It's like, okay, you climb a mountain one step at a time. For everyone listening, as we conclude, like my concluding invitation is map your process, pick the one thing that's the highest impact, that's the easiest to introduce some automation to, and do it. And get the joy of seeing some efficiency, and then do the second and the third. And you'll quickly see, or you'll eventually see like the fruits of that. And it may
Yeah.
be a year or two. Um, you should double your output in 2026, though. Like the tech, it's just there. Like there's no one to stop you. All right, Leonard, go ahead.
Andrew Funk asked about, could we talk about our first AI tool that we implemented in your business processes, or maybe the most impactful, a little bit of perspective. I obviously was somebody who started with ChatGPT, but that is one tool in the entire toolkit. I use Gemini, I use Claude, I use ChatGPT, I use all of them. I use Grok, I use Replit. All of them become tools in the entire toolkit, and they start to roll up. So there is no one individual tool that I think you should be using. We're doing some very interesting stuff over at CRE Agents, which is allowing you to actually use all of those tools
Yeah,
kind of
that's the hope, right? That
simultaneously.
the hope that the Siri agents
Yeah,
can become that unifying layer. But you're right. Today,
that's right.
every task might have a bespoke tool, and it may not even be a tool that helps you to automate it. Um, yeah. 2 more minutes, and it's cool seeing everyone stay on. So keeping folks engaged. What's one? Let's do one more question, Leonard. What else you got on that list?
Yep, yep. Let's see. Uh,
Let's do this.
yep.
So we'll circulate to everyone on the call here. The access to this multiplier framework app, super fun build on our side. We also created an ebook how to build an AI native organization. I think there's some nuggets in there. We'll circulate that around. Contact info for Leonard and Joe if you want to talk to them. And then we'll write up a blog post on the A.CRE side. Any questions that didn't get answered, let's do an FAQ on that as part of sharing this. And then the recording will be available, and we'll share it across various channels, including AI Edge, A.CRE, on this multiplier framework app. So thank you everyone for your time. Happy New Year. Let's make 2026 an incredible one. By the way, we're going to do more of these workshops. So hope to see many of you on others workshops, and have a good rest of your day.
Cheers.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.